Gambling has been going on for a long time, dating far enough back to the point where we can't really say exactly when it started. Considering how the fact that gambling can be achieved with something as simple as two people competing in anything, this should be of no surprise to anyone. The reason it's been going on for such a long time is because it stimulates our reward system. The brain has a built-in function to reward us when something good happens, in order to encourage us to continue doing it. It's easy to see how this has evolutionary advantages, as for example, eating something that's good for you can trigger a reward. While it has clear upsides, like most things, it can be abused. In the case of gambling, getting the rush of winning big can trigger a major dopamine rush that makes us feel really good. If rushes like this continue for extended periods of time, it's easy to get used to them. This leads to things that used to satisfy you fading in comparison to the new, bigger rushes. This is a very simple explanation of addiction, and how gambling can lead to continued search for big wins. Nowadays we have a better understanding of people than ever, which lends itself to taking advantage of these systems for business. Casinos, for example, have been around for a long time, and even though it's widely known that the odds are stacked against you whenever you play, it's still quite popular. But we're not here today to discuss the intricacies of the casino business, but rather how gambling is used in games. The term gambling can't be applied to all aspects of a game that are random, since you're not putting in money. Most of the time, that is. Rather than making you pay up before partaking in a chance game, most games simply have it as a small reward system to throw the state of the game into the air or to keep things fresh. For instance, Mario Kart is known partially for the randomness in it. Every time you roll onto one of those item boxes, you subject yourself to a slight game of chance, where you can get a result that can alter the state of the game drastically. Turn-based RPGs are another example. They tend to use damage ranges and critical hits in order to vary the encounters up a bit, as these types of games already have a tendency to make you go through the motions when encountering smaller enemies. These low-level chance games can of course be observed in Monster Hunter as well. Critical strikes being a game of chance is undeniable, as well as having a monster calm down just as you are dying and giving you time to heal up. Turf wars are more noticeable, as the effect of it is clear to anybody and can be compared to getting a star that puts you back into the running. All of these factors would be difficult to call gambling, as you aren't standing to lose anything. At this level, the term randomness is way more fitting. Going a step further, we have games like Hearthstone, where randomness is built into the skills that are tested. Every time a card is drawn, every time a Mad Bomber is dropped onto the board, you're playing with chance. The reason this becomes a core part of the game is because you as a player are expected to play into that randomness. Making judgment calls based on probability, as well as fully knowing what your deck is capable of, is part of the skills that the game tests you on. Take a moment to imagine a card game where every single card shows up in the exact order that you specified upon making the deck, as well as there being no random effects on cards. The game would lose so much of what it currently is, and your decision making in the game would take on a completely new form, as you no longer have to play with the idea of chance. I'd wager that this would lead to a very dry experience where most of the game would be played in the deck building rather than the game itself. When looking at this camp, we can see that randomness and the effect of it is upscaled. I feel like I can confidently say this considering the amount of YouTube channels that have spawned from recording and combining highlights from this. The highs and lows are very easily seen on people when they experience it, leading to compilations being a good fit, as it allows you to experience those moments in quick succession. On top of all this, Hearthstone gameplay is often compared to poker. This shows how the line between gambling and randomness begins to blur. For Monster Hunter, this level can be seen when you've hunted a monster a couple of times. The increased knowledge about the monster allows you to make calculated guesses on whether it's worth healing or not, as well as using things found in the environment, the frogs being a personal favorite of mine. This is clearly a case of player skill, as the success rate of healing correctly and inflicting status effects go up as you become better, but there is always the chance of hitting a frog only for the monster to go in the opposite direction. And lastly, we have games where the core reward is built around randomness. Here I would put games like Diablo 3. It's easy to see comparisons being made between Diablo and Monster Hunter, as they're both games that gatekeep character progression behind random drops. But for everything the games have in common, like RPG mechanics, character builds, and the aforementioned random rewards, the games also end up handling these systems in different ways, giving you as a player unique experiences that differ quite a bit from one another. Before diving deeper on the differences, I would like to say that it's at this level where I would start considering gambling as an appropriate term, as the player can be seen as putting in their time in order to roll for the item drops. As well as a big difference between this camp and the Hearthstone camp being that in Hearthstone, winning the game is the reward. Whereas in these titles, completing quests as well as clearing rifts allow you a chance at the reward you want. It's easy to think of gambling as something that's bad and shouldn't be done, considering the effect it can have on people's lives. And viewing the games mentioned as gambling and nothing else would be ignoring the fact that the games give enjoyment to the player outside of simply getting that rare drop. In this way, it's a lot healthier than the classic money gambling, because if the player enjoys their time no matter the reward, they can't really be seen as having lost that time. Throughout the years, I've enjoyed both of these games a lot, and the gambling aspect of them have kept me engaged in them both for long periods of time. But with that experience, I've noticed that the key difference between them being their subtlety in handling the random elements. Diablo 3 starts out pretty tame, with the player taking on a few low-level enemies in order to not overwhelm you, but it quickly transitions into a player who leashes groups of enemies into a room in order to make them explode so you can quickly loot whatever's dropped that might be of value to you. This gets taken to such an extreme degree that you start to lose perspective of what's actually going on, and the enemies becoming little else than walking chests that have a chance of containing what you're looking for. You usually only have to go a handful of minutes before getting a drop of some kind that holds potential. This way, Diablo keeps your attention by never letting you go too long without a reward. If by any chance you end up running around for an extended period of time without anything of interest dropping, your mind is still occupied with flashy colors from your skills as well as the blood and limbs of your enemies flying around for you to enjoy as you await the next drop. Diablo is a masterclass in getting your attention and keeping it, as you always have the feeling that if you just play for a little bit longer, you might be able to get that thing that you're searching for. And to make sure you keep going, it puts on a show much like slot machines will have loud noises and flashing lights to keep your mind engaged. Monster Hunter, on the other hand, chooses to focus on other things. In a lot of ways, the game doesn't differ that much from the first time you hunt the Great Jagras. When compared to Diablo, where you go from killing single enemies with pinpoint attacks to dragging as many of them into a room for slaughter, the difference is clear. Monster Hunter keeps you challenged in a similar way for the majority of its runtime, by letting you engage with stronger monsters for longer periods of time, and in a sense, learning the ins and outs of the creature as you're hunting it. This change allows the monster to develop a certain level of character, rather than being something that should be quickly disposed of. The game allows the challenge to shine, as it doesn't feel the need to constantly shove rewards, flashy effects, and sounds down your throat. Even though it's handled in this way, I still feel a lot of the same pull for continued playing when playing the different games. But the difference isn't in whether I'm playing or not, it's how I'm playing. When I'm playing Monster Hunter, I am constantly engaged as I'm tracking the monster down, thinking about how I'm going to fight it and executing my plan. On the other hand, Diablo is one of the few games that I play with my own music in the background. This is because at some point while playing, it became less about the gameplay and more a force of habit that keeps my mind busy with whatever it throws on screen. Now, I've spent a lot of time gushing about Monster Hunter, but I'd be remiss to not mention the level that you can take the game to. When becoming better at the game, quests can get a lot shorter. And I mean a lot. I've seen people taking out some of the scariest monsters out there in a matter of seconds. These people have reached a level of mastery that is beyond the vast majority of players. And the enjoyment you get out of the game has probably transformed into something that I can't relate to, as I am far from that level, as well as not knowing anybody that plays at that level. In conclusion, gambling in games, if you want to use that term, can take on many forms. And whether you're looking for low, mid, or high levels of chance, you're going to be able to find them, and that freedom is a good thing as it allows us to find the level that suits us the most. For me, Monster Hunter is a breath of fresh air in a day and age where everything is out to capture our attention. Where Diablo is the slot machine that does whatever it can in order to keep you playing, Monster Hunter would be the low-stakes poker game with your buddies. Rather than focusing on the chance of winning, it's more about the experience itself. This makes me feel as though the game not only shows respect to the monsters and how alive it makes them feel, but also respects me as a human being and the time I put into it. I'd like to take this moment to shortly discuss the low level of loot box mentions in this video. It might have come as a surprise that they didn't end up taking up a big part of it, as it's clear as day that they are the closest we get to actual gambling in video games. Personally, I feel like the topic is huge and it's something that I might take the time to discuss in the future. But it seemed like a bad fit to dwell on something that the developers behind Monster Hunter didn't put in the game. Which again makes me feel like the developers show a lot of respect to us, as it would have been very easy to include in order to make a quick buck. If you've made it this far into the video, I would like to start out by thanking you. As always, in the case that you feel like I could improve on anything, I'd like to hear about it in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd be very happy to see you like and subscribe, as it shows me that I'm doing something right. Thank you, and have a great day.